Hello and welcome to the Proptech Hot Seat on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we explore trends and technologies driving innovation across the built environment. The show is brought to you in partnership with Proptech Ireland, the hub for innovators, investors and indeed for industry leaders. Apologies to anybody watching rather than listening in today. We are recording from the road, so apologies for the poor visual quality. But as we are experiencing a heat wave in Ireland, such a rare event, there are reasons and excuses for being on the road. So bear with us and we hope the sound quality will hold up. In the Proptech Hot Seat today is Kyle Spencer and David Blumenfeld, co-founders of NextRivet. NextRivet's focus on digital innovation opportunities, supported by an expansive network of solutions, make them the ideal source of consultation for the real estate innovation space, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome today. David, you might just tell us a little bit, what is NextRivet and what is it that you and the team do?
Sounds good. Thanks, Carol. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So NextRivet, we are as you've mentioned, a digital innovation consultancy focused on essentially bringing digital innovation into the physical environment. Kyle and I were first started working together at Westfield shopping centers, obviously with a presence there in the UK as well as in Australia and the US. And the goal there was very similar from a broad perspective. How do we essentially keep the property relevant through digital innovation, but also things that are not just digital for digital's sake, but actually, worthwhile and either consumer facing or tenant facing. And so we really, through a number of years there, got to work across a variety of different technologies, again, front end, back end. And so when we saw an opportunity over time, we really saw an opportunity that, many other shopping centers were kind of in a similar boat where there's all this digital happening, trying to figure out how to kind of make sense of all of it and how to implement it. And so in late 2019, Kyle and I essentially spun ourselves out, formed NextRivet really to do kind of this kind of digital innovation on behalf of other real estate and shopping center companies. And again, I think the thing that differentiates us from a lot of the kind of larger consulting firms is, we're really there to actually roll up our sleeves and get work done. We kind of like to say strategy is easy, execution is hard. And I think, at the end of the day, especially as you're coming out of the pandemic, and I think a lot of these companies are more resource strapped than ever before. And certainly expertise is the digital expertise is not kind of native to this industry. It's really, how do we come in, not just provide a strategy, but actually provide the pair of hands to get projects done. And I think that's really what we focus on and pride ourselves on.
I'm really excited to talk to you both today because, as I mentioned to you before we kicked off, that actually generally in the Proptech Hot Seat, we're talking to founders and solution providers where, there's sometimes an element to the conversation. Have you ever heard the expression, to a man with a hammer or to a man with a hammer, everything's a nail? And it's a little bit like that, founders, and I get it. It is the secret of success. You think you're solving the most important problem and you think your solution is the only way to solve that particular problem. Whereas actually what we know in practice is that there are so many problems competing for resources that actually not all of them deserve to be and are feasible to solve. So it actually is a case of balancing resources. And I agree with you completely. I absolutely think that it does come down to execution, and I believe that this is where maybe we're falling down on PropTech innovation, and that's from an Irish and UK perspective. I don't know, you obviously are operating globally, so your perspective might be slightly different. Can you maybe talk us through what execution looks like for a typical client?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it starts again with strategy and what are we trying to accomplish? And I think you're right. It's a combination of two things. Is this the right good idea? But also sometimes, for a lot of our clients, they have 5 good ideas, and they all are good ideas, but they have the time and the effort or the resources to do 2 of those, for instance. And so we can help them take on the 3rd and the 4th. And that starts with, again, what are you trying to achieve? Starting to help them build the product requirements. So finding the right solution. We are solution agnostic. We kind of treat ourselves as Switzerland when we look with our clients. We're not necessarily trying to pitch a particular product. or a vendor or a solution. But what we are trying to do is understand what they're trying to achieve, and then find the right solution in that category to help them, get it across the line. And so we'll help them build the product requirements document. We'll help them understand what they're trying to achieve. We'll build the strategy with them. But then, to David's point, we'll then take it another level. And if they need the help, we will help them go find that solution, and then work with that vendor or that technology solution to begin to implement it. And that can be as simple as project managing the timing, and again taking this piece off of the plate of our clients because they just don't have the time or the expertise, and helping them get it over the finish line essentially.
And without being flippant, it's my experience that some business owners don't know what their problems are. So actually, do most of your clients present to you with a set of problems, or actually do you help them identify those?
It's really across. It's really a spectrum. I think there are some clients who are like, something as simple as, we know we need to innovate. We know we need to bring digital into the property. We don't know where to start. Or we have some of that. We have some ideas, as Kyle was saying, but we don't know how to prioritize them. To then to the other side, what you said, which is, hey, we have these issues. We're trying to solve for them. We just don't, again, have the expertise or know who we should implement. And so it's really on a case by case basis. We'll come in and a lot of our clients may start with a specific project in mind, and then it kind of expands from there. But we have a number of clients who've said, help us come and understand, like, help us benchmark what we're doing against property owners around the world. And then once we kind of do that, say, okay, help us prioritize which projects we should get started on, and help us sequence those. And then ultimately, we're now at a point with one client where we've gone through that entire exercise, and now we're kind of on point to execute, a handful of them by the end of the year.
I think the benchmarking is a really interesting one, because I think I'm not sure that people outside of the industry realize, but actually this is a very competitive industry, not just from a commercial point of view, but from a reputational point of view. People like to be seen to be first. They like to be leading in certain areas, and they pride themselves on things that, as a company, that their ethos, where they're driving. And actually, that's been a huge competitive driving source. But do we know what the baseline is? So, you talk there about introducing digital into the business, but I would imagine in 2023, you're not meeting any business that doesn't have some element of digital across their business streams.
Oh, I mean, 100%. Yes. And again, it comes to, a perfect example is the shopping mall industry that is now moving into mixed use, right? And so as they are starting to expand from their traditional core business of running retail and shopping, and as a property owner, and now starting to build office and residential across, whether within the portfolio or exactly right across the street from the shopping mall. Some of those areas are areas where they didn't necessarily have digital, and they don't have that connective tissue to understand how do I necessarily take the retail experience and build that into my residential and my office experience, and vice versa. How do I take the office and residential and merge those into my residential experience? And for a lot of our clients, that digital technology and that solution just never really existed, because they're getting into a new area of their business that they never have ever had to run before them, and they understand the retail side and they understand the technology side, and that's consumer facing a lot of times. But when you get into office and residential, now you're working with tenants, and you're working with the retailers and your office tenant space to try to pull them over into the retail side.
Sometimes the feedback I get when I'm speaking to people who have listened in and heard about an exciting solution being pitched, and sometimes it's hard to understand the context in which innovation needs to happen across an organization. So, can you walk us through maybe a typical example, or maybe there is no such thing as typical, but maybe even walk us through one of your more recent clients that you've worked with? Where's the starting point? How are you assessing the baseline? What are the early, the early initiatives that you're bringing clients through?
Good question. I think it's again, it's a combination of things. I referred to the previous project again, where we literally started with kind of a rapid review or a rapid assessment of everything they had been doing to date. And then we went to that benchmarking, that stage, as we mentioned, which is, okay, based on the things you're doing to date, how does that stack up against rest of world, that kind of best in class? But also, here's some things you need to look at that you're not doing at all, and kind of fill out that roadmap, if you will. From there, then it's kind of presenting that material and then working with the client base. And obviously, market to market, there are things that may work. So, for example, a trend that and a project that's been fairly prevalent, especially as coming out of the pandemic, is around last mile fulfillment, and whether or not you can use the shopping center to help aggregate and lower the unit economics on behalf of your retailers. And in certain countries, there's a kind of well-defined and built-out infrastructure of last-mile carriers and all of those things. In other countries, it's just not as realistic. You can't, it's not safe enough to leave a package anywhere. Therefore, there's a lot of, there are variances. So you have to kind of take into account, okay, what's going on in the world, what's also realistic for that country, based on the infrastructure and trends and just kind of demographics and everything else. And then from there, it's a prioritization and also looking at, okay, scoping it from a cost perspective. Obviously, I think what a lot of times innovation falls down because the traditional business is so used to kind of a very clear ROI or NOI, if you want to call it that, in terms of, I build a shopping center, I build a new wing, I know that's going to pay off 5 years from now based on, 100 years of data. In the innovation space, the quickest way to kill something is to get, obviously you need to do something that is going to scale and there's a path, but you may not know every single thing about how it's going to pencil. But if you don't start somewhere, you're never gonna do anything successful. And I think that's, it's getting some of our clients kind of past the, oh gosh, how's this going to pencil in 6 months? Well, we gotta get started. And I think that's a really important thing. I think the shopping center industry, you talked about everybody wanting to kind of be first, but the reality is we always kind of joke that everybody wants to be the first to be second.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
and a lot of times everybody wants to be the first to be 15th in this industry. And so it's getting people to kind of take a little bit of a leap in terms of trying some things, because the nice thing in the digital space, you can try things, and if it fails, it's okay. I mean, you need to fail fast, and we're not encouraging, we're obviously trying to set our clients up for success, but it's not like you're putting a wall in place that you suddenly have to knock down in 6 months. There's ways to kind of test and learn in a much more flexible and agile way than I think in the kind of traditional physical space.
I'm really glad that you brought up the concept of failure, because actually this is not an industry that responds well to failure. And I think that that's possibly because it's such a low margin industry that failure has such a high cost implication.
Exactly.
However, once you're bringing innovation into the conversation, you have to build in failure, but we can't call it failure because it is part of the process. It's not the final outcome, but actually there will be things that work to a greater extent than others. And whether you call that a failure or a learning, the reality is there has to be scope within the project to do it. And, I think that this is probably where the value of benchmarking comes in. I'm really interested in the global benchmarking that you're doing, because there's such a chronic shortage of data for these more, some of the metrics that are maybe more ESG driven. It can be quite difficult to get access to that information. So when you're embarking on, say, a global benchmarking study for a new client, what kind of metrics are you looking at? Where are the I suppose gaps in our data globally?
I mean, I guess it's a long way. The data is not necessarily always the driver. I think some of it is for us being a global firm and with clients in, I guess, 11 countries now, we're able to kind of bring the experiences that we've had with those clients, and as David mentioned, you're bringing learnings, not only of what worked well, but what didn't work well. And I certainly, when we started Westfield Labs, and we had fairly broad charter at, starting in 2012 to bring innovation across the Westfield portfolio in US and UK and Australia. We were across a lot of things. As an organization that were front-end consumer experiences, back-end, data organization and building a consumer experience and building a consumer database. But there was wins, but there was plenty of losses. And so for us, I think the benchmarking is and data points is what necessarily doesn't always have to be what is working successfully. Some of it can be what is not actually working. What have you tried and failed at? And how do you build off the learnings of the failures sometimes? And I think that's, again, that goes to the core of innovation, is building off of failures. But for us, certainly with a global client base, we're able to really look across all our different clients, as well as, what even some of our other non-clients, but industry colleagues that we know pretty well, are able to kind of share with us on what they've learned. Because it is a pretty close-knit community when you really get down to it. It's a big community across the globe, but everyone also kind of knows each other a little bit, and you have a good sense of a portfolio and their asset classes and the types of things that they have, and will that necessarily translate and work towards for my portfolio and my asset classes. And so getting those learnings is really important.
I think that makes absolute sense. There's a value in learning what didn't work previously. Not to say that it won't work in a different set of circumstances, but there's a value in that. I mean, in Proptech Ireland, we have a much more colloquial way of summing that up, and that is, life is too short to make every mistake yourself. It's okay to learn from some of the mistakes that other founders have made. You don't need to make them all yourself. It's not a rite of passage. And actually, it's foolish not to learn from what's gone before, but you just don't want to be taken off track doing that. If you have a core belief that you can bring something different to the table, then absolutely follow that. Because you're operating in 11 countries, and the fact that you are solution agnostic, that must give you a really good sense of perspective on the sector, maybe that I mightn't have. Where are you seeing an increased demand for technology, as we kind of look towards 2024 and beyond?
Well, I think, certainly Kyle touched on it a little bit, but I think there's interesting developments, certainly kind of in the mixed use area, right? As property owners, again, try to establish retail, residential, office, but trying to do it in a way that's not so siloed. So how do we create a community amongst these groups? So whether it's cross shopping or getting people to move from one area to another, I think that's where there's, I think Kyle used this term too, is the connected. How do you build that connective tissue to create this community where people aren't just living there, but then there's no connection to retail, or they're working there and there's no connection to either residential or retail. So I think that's where we're seeing a lot of technology come into play, certainly from the kind of the end user experience, and then
those tenant experience applications. So anything from the tenant experience on the residential side, which is similar to the tenant experience on the office side, but has a lot of similarities. But again, each of those asset classes, whether it's residential or office, they really do have very different use cases and tasks in which you need to do. For residential, it's package control and understanding package and I guess food delivery, letting them access and understanding where the packages are coming in and to your building and when you've received them and being able to store those. But and then everything from access control and controlling your smart building from an app and turning on your air conditioning or your heat, depending on the country that you live in, turning on your thermostat before you get arrived. And then in the office space, it's booking conference rooms, or it's booking parking solutions and having access to the building. But again, all of those things, what's the connective tissue that then again ties it together for the portfolio owner who does own residential and office and retail, and you are trying to kind of build a community around that and pull all those pieces together.
That's really interesting. In 4 years of this show, this is actually the first time that we've heard about tenant engagement and the tenant experience for retail that isn't focused on the tenant's customer? You know, because again, in office we talk about the tenant experience, in residential we talk about the tenant experience, but for retail we go straight to the experience of the customer, not the retail tenant. So that's a really interesting thing. What makes for a good tenant experience for a retailer?
Well, I think you're something that we've kind of latched onto is kind of and an opportunity for property owners is really to move away from just being kind of that landlord tenant relationship, right? That's always fun and tension filled and mutually beneficial, but also difficult and in a lot of times too. And something we've kind of termed as retail as a service, right? So there's an opportunity for landlords to do things such as enabling kind of centralized last mile fulfillment. That's a project that we've worked with a lot of mall operators on, which is, in supporting your retailers' omni-channel efforts. As retailers do a lot of ship from store, it's very expensive to do that on a one-off basis. But if you can take advantage of kind of the collective set of retailers on property, and instead of one package going out to a certain neighborhood, if you could aggregate with, say, 4 other retailers, and now instead of one package going out on one truck, it's 5 packages going out, you'll ultimately lower the unit economics. And actually make things more efficient. And now, wow, if the landlord is actually helping to centralize those operations, that's a benefit that the landlord is providing to the tenant. That makes that property essentially stickier, because now if I have a choice between, as a retailer, if I have a choice between a property that's helping me with my omni-channel efforts and another property that's not, there's actually a differentiator there. And again, it kind of takes things out of that kind of that traditional relationship into one that's much more collaborative, and win-win.
Very good. Being in this space, because you are solution agnostic, but you're speaking to clients about the problems they're having, you're experiencing the difficulties on the ground. What Proptech is needed, but that you're not seeing? Are you seeing a problem that has yet to have a solution come and target it?
Well,
I'll just give one based on what I was just talking about. I think the biggest challenge in things like centralized fulfillment is the ability for retailers to connect their inventory and understand where their inventory is at all times. And it's an age-old problem that we still see. Even forget the centralized fulfillment, like from a retailer's perspective, just being able to have store-based inventory that's tied to their online inventory when a lot of times the systems were kind of built separately. And it's probably something they're talking about 10 years ago, but it's still the case today. We're seeing it's like, when you think about a store relative to warehouse, the store is just kind of a consumer, kind of a forward endpoint inventory source, right? And you would think that a system could be set up to say, okay, I have my distribution warehouse in the middle of the country or by the airport. Now I have this store that's kind of the tip of the spear close to the consumer, but I don't know what's there, or it's updated every night. It's not in real time. And so that kind of the visibility to be able to do it, a lot of retailers kind of do it a little bit kind of fake it until you make it, right? Because they know, okay, I know I have a lot of that SKU at that store. We'll just count on that being there versus actually being able to plan for that. I think that's still a needed thing. And obviously then when you're talking about, putting it into a centralized location with other retailers, you've got to have that visibility. So I would say that's a big one right off the bat that's still a challenge for many retailers. Very
good. Kyle, have you any insights on this?
I was going to go with the same example, unfortunately.
No, well, I think that it's really interesting, and it actually ties in with a point that was made on a show only in the last number of weeks, and that is, it felt like back in 2015 and 2016, we were really focused on the headline worthy, the really disruptive innovation, and actually what we're seeing this year and last year really is more enabling tech. It's just the tech that gets stuff done quicker, more efficient, cheaper. We seem to be in a period that's less about headlines, more about just enabling and getting stuff done. And actually, the industry can get behind that. That's what the
Yeah,
industry
exactly.
wanted. There's maybe there's a message in that for everybody who was selling disruption 6 and 7 years ago, that actually the industry just wanted stuff that made their lives easier and better and faster.
Yeah.
There's this massive wave of AI obviously happening right now, right? We're at this huge tipping point.
Yeah.
And yet, if you don't have the baseline systems in place, it doesn't matter how good your AI is.
Yeah.
You're still going to be in the same place.
I think that's a really great point. Thank you both so much for being so generous with your time. I suppose finally, before we finish up, you guys are not yet in the Irish market, maybe are interested in talking to clients in the Irish market, although you are obviously across Europe.
Yep.
What's your long-term vision for NextRivet? What's next?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I continue to do what we've been doing and expand the business again to other locations. I mean, I think as a consultancy, and we talked about it earlier, the more diverse client base and the more diverse locations and portfolio and different asset classes that we work with, the better it's going to be for our existing clients. And again, we continue to grow and find new markets and find new locations that, for mall operators, again, the challenges are very similar. Everyone's got very similar challenges, and we continue to hope to help fulfill and work through those challenges with our clients and find new opportunities in different parts of the countries and world.
Very good. Well, look, I look forward to seeing the progress. Thank you both for being so generous with your time. That was Kyle Spencer and David Blumenfeld, co-founders of NextRivet. Also, my thanks to producer Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media on Sound. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out all of the other real estate and construction shows on iPropertyRadio. Before we go, a special word of thanks to our sponsor, Proptech Ireland, the hub for innovators, investors and industry leaders in Ireland. So again, thank you to Proptech Ireland for making these conversations possible. And thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Proptech Hot Seat here on iPropertyRadio.